All right. Well, should we get started, you think?
I think so. Let's get started and people can join us
Okay.
as they come on board here.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to what may be the first and only annual Zoom meeting for the Native Community Organic Farm. We're typically huddled around the fire in the back room eating really good food at this point, but we're thankful for even an electronic gathering in a way. My name is Casey. I'm the executive director at the farm and want to thank everybody for being here tonight. A few housekeeping things first. We'll have a question and answer section at the end of the presentation following Jillian's presentation. But feel free to type any questions you may have as they arise throughout in the chat option down there. And we'll collect all of them and put them in a nice little neat bundle and address as many as we can at the end. So we're just gonna jump right in. This has been a really interesting year, 2020. If we look back on it, I think for me, there's a lot of words that pop out at from 2020. I think pride is one. The staff and what we were able to do this year was pretty amazing in response to COVID. We all know about that. But resiliency was a big word that we tossed around this year. And I think the farm, as you will see, did a lot of really amazing things in a lot of amazing ways. And so you hear words like resiliency and pivoting and how we were really able to provide something for the community when they needed it most. So you'll hear those words a lot. And as we dig in here, Trish is going to first talk a little bit about the agenda for tonight. So Trish, take it away.
Okay, thanks. You can hear me, right? Okay. First off, thank you to everyone for coming. It's really nice to see familiar faces, George and Chris and all sorts of folks. I'm managing the weight room too, so let me just admit these people. So tonight we'll start with, as we always do, with an introduction of who makes the magic happen, which is the staff and the board. We're gonna take a real 10,000 foot overview of how our financials wrapped up for last year in terms of income and expenses. We're going to talk about how we met the needs of the community in the past year. And in particular, we're going to concentrate on some stories told not just from our viewpoint, but from our constituents' standpoint of how the year went in terms of resiliency. And then we're going to conclude with Jillian, who I'm really excited to hear it speak. She's the sustainability coordinator for the town of Natick, and she's got a lot of very cool projects happening here in town, including some that we'll be involved with as years go on. So thank you all for coming. Again, I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and so will Casey. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask of the farm, put it in there. If you're having a technical question, you can put it in there. We'll give it a whirl. We'll try and answer it for you. I would ask that while you're listening that you mute yourself on your microphone. And okay, take it away. Miss Ann, next.
That's actually me. So my name's Audrey Ferguson. I'm one of the assistant directors at the farm, and I tend to work primarily with the education staff and the livestock. And so I'm just going to give you a quick little go round of all of our education staff. So first we have Olivia Tomes, who was brought in February of last year and who got thrown in really to the deep end with all of her programs getting canceled. And she had to respond with, grace and composure and really not only learn the farm, but learn, learn how to do things a little bit different. And then we have Christine Schell, who is in charge of our volunteers, as well as our school and scouts program, who also saw all of her programs kind of evaporate. And so had to really do a lot of creative thinking on her feet. Libby and Victoria are our forest gnomes teachers, who have added dealing with face masks to the litany of gear that they deal with every day with our forest gnomes outdoor program for preschool age children. So mad props to them. And then lastly, Brooke Loomis is our TerraCore service member who literally had no idea what she was signing up for, because when we interviewed her, every single comment about the job was, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like. So love the fact that she has jumped right in and has been super flexible with all of that. And then, of course, not pictured here are the fantastic and flexible part-time educators, teachers who have handled everything that we have thrown at them this year with good humor. If you have a child, a grandchild, a neighbor, a niece, nephew who's participated in one of our programs this summer, this fall, this winter, you know, a big thank you to the teachers because they seriously deserve it. And that is our education staff.
All right, well, holding down the fort in the back office, I am joined with a very capable TerraCourt service woman named Ann Flaherty. She's the one actually running this presentation tonight. Thanks, Ann. And like Brooke, she also had to jump feet first into the deep end of the pool because we didn't necessarily know what we would be marketing and doing outreach about, but she has been a huge addition to our office. If you've seen the blog, you've seen some of the wonderful videos coming out about the farm, about the educational programs, and about our teen programs. That's all her work. So I'll toot her horn since she won't do it. And then I am my official title is Assistant Director of Internal Operations at the farm. I handle events, development, fundraising, kids in timeout, turkey concierging, lost socks, lost cell phones, and fixing the copier. Take it away.
So the third leg, or the third kind of section of the farm, is what we call the production side. So we are blessed to have Heather as our flower manager. Heather started when she was 16 as a volunteer and has risen through the ranks, and now has probably one of the most technical flower skill sets of any person in the Metro West area, pictured with her 2 dogs, which she loves immensely. Zoe is well known for wearing all pink at the farm, and we love it. She brings a lot of energy. She is our TerraCourt member. She works with the animals, with the flowers, the maple syrup, and the vegetables as well. Down on the bottom side there, we have our apprentices. Our apprentices are folks who we consider rock stars. So they commit to us for 2 years, and we commit to them for 2 years and teach them everything from maple syruping to weed whacking to everything. They're integral to what we do. And then we also have our part-time folks who've graduated out of the program, like our Antonios and our Pats and Ians and Sarahs. They're critical to the functioning of the farm as well. But we also can't forget about our volunteers. They're a really big piece of what drives the farm, and we were very happy and grateful that we were able to integrate them back into the farm safely in the fall, beginning on Tuesdays, and now we're actually able to do Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we're thankful for that. That's our staff. Actually, there's one more I forgot. Anne, you want to flip it over? Awesome. So our additional staff, we have Suzanne Hayes, who works in the back office, does all of our accounting, our books, to make sure everything's perfect and ready to go. And then we have Abby, who is our weekend caretaker, who is able to give us a little bit of rest on the weekends, who does the work of at least 10 people to manage the greenhouses, the animals. She's one of the nicest, happiest, smiley faces you'll see at the farm on the weekend. She allows us to do a lot and have a little bit of rest on Saturday and Sunday. And now to introduce the board of directors, we have Mary.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Wish we were having that sharing that potluck dinner together. Hopefully soon. I would like to introduce to you the board of directors. There are 13 of us total, consisting of 4 officers, myself as president, Patty Luke, vice president, Andrew Williams, treasurer, and Jessica Hardigan, clerk. 7 members: Sarah Lassonde, Eric Stitch, Tom Taylor, Leanne Cowley, Moira Munns, Suzanne Barr, and Ron Ayers. And 2 student board members, Sarah Wheeler and Gabe Proya. Student board members are non-voting, but otherwise are responsible for every other duty of a regular board member. That's a quick intro, but if you do see any of us at the farm, please don't hesitate to introduce yourselves to us. You've got a quick snapshot of all of us. So thank you. And Casey, I'll pass the mic back to you.
Sure, and if you want to flip to the next slide. Strangely, we have some lines that have just come into the screen, so we'll work through those and figure out how to get rid of them. We're all
Casey, why don't I just try to stop sharing and share again and see if that gets rid of it?
sure, that's fine. We're
Okay.
great farmers. We're not the best tech savvy folks. You'll have to give us a sec here, but I can start to talk a little bit through the financials. So typically the farm, I think of it in terms of 3 legs. So we have our, hey, there you go. Thanks, Ann. So we have our production, our education, and our events. And in response to COVID, we pivoted. That's kind of what we do. That's the foundation that Linda gave to us, and we lean heavily on that. So when one thing isn't working or one thing isn't able to do, we move. And so that's kind of what we did this year. We pivoted early in the season. You know, we were selling tons of seedlings because that's what people were needing and wanting. And then when our educational opportunities became available, we went and followed that. And so, and sadly, we didn't do as much with events because we couldn't really gather people together. But what we did find was some really impressive things in terms of support. And so on the right side of the screen, Trish did a really amazing job reaching out to folks just to see how they could support us and the community. And so we had the coronavirus food assistance program that helped. That was a national program that supported the work that we were doing. MDAR was a group that provided us with funds to build a hoop house in the back of the farm, and also some funds to do our silvopasture work. Metro West Health Foundation gave us the funds to help with our senior share. And the community responded. Individuals within Natick as well really helped us out to make it through this year. So it was a real community aspect from, you know, very national levels to very local levels. And so we just pivoted a little bit in our income side. And if you want to sneak to the next. So on the expense side, we saw relatively little difference from year to year. The only major difference is that early on in the year, we were still navigating the policies of COVID, and we had to reduce our number of hours for our teens and our volunteers. So we weighed a little bit more heavily on our staff. And so our staff costs were increased a little bit, but in general, you know, we did about the same as we normally do, which was really great. I think it speaks to the level of resilience that we have as an organization. And if you want to speak to the next slide. So if we start with the big picture, I think of 2020 as meeting the need of the community. It was a crazy year, and hopefully we won't see another year like it, but I feel like we met the need of the community in 3 really important ways. The first is, I love this picture because as you look down that driveway, there's no gate. We did not shut down the entire year. And it may seem like a really simple thing, but people needed time to be outside. And when other organizations were closing their doors and saying, you know, you can't come in here right now, we stayed open. And I think it meant a lot to that community to be able to say, yeah, we're welcoming, keep coming, we're gonna work through it together. This is a place for all of us. That was a really simple thing, but I think a big gesture. This is one of the cutest little pictures I think I've ever seen. And I have to give props to Audrey and Olivia. When we were able to really start providing programming, they figured out how to do it. And, you know, many of the folks who are on this call are parents and we're working from home and juggling, you know, being a professional with being a parent at the same time. And Olivia and Audrey really pulled together programming that really allowed kids to be at the farm, do it in a very safe way, and allowed those kids to get outside and do meaningful work. And so these are the kids who got to feed the pigs on the given day. And so one thing that they got to do is come to the farm more, right? So we increased our programming to allow those parents to have some time to do what they had to do. And lastly, the third major way that we met the need was through our food, right? So we grew more food. We did more broilers this year. I can remember a point when someone was telling me in the grocery store, you can't find meat anymore, right? So Audrey realized that and realized that the community needed those things, and so responded in a way where we did have more meat. We did more CSA shares, and we had the farm stand stocked. So we provided more food for the community when they needed it. As we move to the next set of slides here, we're really going to dig into this idea of resilience, and we're going to piece it out into our education, our events, and our production, and talk about how that really played out in each of those three ways, and then really talk about or allow you to see some stories of people who went through our programs. You'll see some videos from those folks. So I'll pass it over to Audrey, who's going to talk a little bit about the education section.
All right. Hello, I'm Audrey, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I work at the farm and I sort of live in the farm with cats and dogs. So there might be, and a kid, there might be some interruption every now and then. Winslow would like to say hi. But yeah, so like many educators and many nonprofits, we were completely taken aback and taken surprise when it became very clear how serious, COVID was going to be. We knew that we were in a unique position here at NCOF. The majority of our programs are out of doors, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that the reality of COVID in March, really did throw us for a loop like it did for everybody, I would say. In the beginning, we grieved. We grieved for the loss of normalcy. We grieved for the lack of programming. We, grieved for the fear and doubt and the uncertainty that was going on in the world. And we know that many of you felt that exact same way that we did. But then at the end of the day, we're educators, we're farm staff, and we don't do inactivity well. Most of us can barely sit still. So we pivoted. And because that was really what we needed to do, because it became clear to us that we couldn't continue to run the programs the way we had. Normally, we asked ourselves, what does our community need? And so we said to ourselves, well, what they need is they need something to look forward to. And so we didn't close. And we said, okay, what can we do? If you know us, you know that technology is not a comfortable sphere for us, but we persevered in the only way that, we could. And so we saw it as an avenue to connect with people. So we started doing things online that we'd never done before. You might remember Zach's really entertaining stories where he would go in and read a book and the goats would potentially try to eat his book, or the pigs would potentially try to knock him over. And it was fun and it was engaging, and we knew that it, made people happy and it gave them something to look forward to. It was something that I never thought that I would ever be doing, that I would ever be talking to any of my educators about making craft kits to put out on our market stand. But it was what the community needed, and it was what we could do, because again, we don't do any activity well. So then once we sort of had this understanding of what life was going to look like, we looked forward towards summer, and we agonized over what to do with our summer programs. We asked ourselves, how could we do this safely? And we were really proud because we were able to run an abbreviated summer program for ages 10 and over. And then we couldn't provide our regular programs to the entire range that normally attends the farm. What we were able to do was sort of convert our regular programs to these family style pod classes, where families were able to sort of self-select, bring the people that they wanted to the farm, and be able to participate in that way. Because at the end of the day, the pigs got to eat, the rabbits have to be taken care of. And so we were really pleased that we were able to sort of provide something to look forward to, some sort of sense of normalcy, something for people to be excited for, because that really was our hope. Because again, the farm just doesn't feel like the farm without our young people working beside us and with us and learning. So then we asked, what's next? One of the things we hadn't anticipated was computer fatigue. We joked a lot with the kids this summer that, did you ever think you would say that you were sick of being on the computer? And they all were laughing and saying no. We said, these will be things you can tell your grandkids, that you were sick of being on a screen. we also, along with, you know, everybody else, couldn't even begin to understand how remote learning or hybrid education would look. And we watched as, you know, schools tried to figure out what this would look like in the fall. And the beauty of the farm is that we were able to adapt to it. And so we could simply say, yeah, we can do that. So we listened to what people needed. So some families needed a homeschool program. People who had never homeschooled before in their life needed a homeschool program to send their elementary age children, something that would break up the monotony of daily screen usage. And so we said, we can do that. And some families needed an extended after school program because some of the schools in Natick were ending at 1 o'clock and their children needed a place to eat their bagged lunch and then be able to blow off some steam outside. And so we said, we can do that. And so we offered a more extensive after school program that we had, you know, never offered before. And some families said that, you know, we need a safe space for our middle school students because they have lost their after school programs. They've lost their sports. They've lost their theater. We need something for them to do, something place for them to be productive. And so we said, we can do that. We can provide that. And we welcomed more middle school kids this year than we have ever seen in the past. And it's been just a delight to see them and get to know them better and to watch them sort of take ownership and charge of what they're doing. It's been fantastic to watch. And other families said, we need a space to blow off steam with our toddlers. We can't take them to our regular gymnastics class or our regular music class. And so we said, we can provide more. We can provide programming for, you know, 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And when families told us, listen, my child's preschool is closing because they're unable to deal with the COVID restrictions or they're not able to keep their staff, we looked at it and we said, we have the space, we have the educators, we can offer more. So we are opening up a program for 3 to 5-year-olds that begins next week, in fact. So really the crux of education this year has been looking at what we can do, how we can respond, and what we can provide people. And so a lot of that has been providing, you know, extended or different programs. And some of it has been offering things that we've never offered before. And some of it has also been welcoming people to the farm who maybe wouldn't normally have done that, wouldn't normally have been able to take advantage of that. And to me, that's been one of the most exciting things, I think, is seeing kids, young people that maybe would never have come to the farm in a regular year, but because of many different reasons, they're able to come to the farm. They're able to sort of connect with this part of themselves that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do. And really, for some of them, they're able to sort of slow down and take it in a little bit more. And that's been really, really exciting to watch. And it's been just such a pleasure to be able to offer that to our community because we are the Native community farm. We are here to be with people and to be in community with them. So I like to think that we in the education have been able to offer something for everybody who has come to the farm this year, you know, something for the kids to learn about themselves, to learn about sustainability, to learn about resiliency, to learn about where their food comes from, or even to learn that you can be outside when it's 20 degrees. And that's been a really wonderful aspect of this year for us, finding the good even in the hardest times. And so I am about to turn it over to two lovely individuals, Sage and Arden Union. Sage was part of our initial Forest Gnomes class back in 2009, and Arden also did 2 years of Forest Gnomes as well. And then they have both grown up with the farm. They have come along, and it was really wonderful to be able to see them back at the farm this summer, and to know that they were able to continue to be a part of us, and we were able to still be a part of their lives. So Anne, if you wouldn't mind, we will hear from Sage and Arden now.
Hi, this is Sage and Arden Wen, and we'd love to talk about our experience at the farm this summer for a couple of minutes. So, what was awesome for me was that I haven't been part of the farm programs for many, many years. Like, I used to do it when I was very little, like elementary school age. So, I'd kind of forgotten what the routine was and how things were done at the farm. And because of COVID this summer, I had a lot more time on my hands and I could sign up for this program to work with the teens, I think. Was it the teen something? Yeah. And it was great. It was just so awesome. They made work so accessible for like a huge age group. And I just learned so much, probably more than I did when I was younger and couldn't remember a lot of stuff. So we got to work with animals and plants and do a lot of maintenance at the farm. And I just think it's a great experience to be surrounded by a bunch of people that are just as hardworking as you, and kind of all want to do something for the community, because this is a really great community that we have at the farm. And then what the farm contributes to as at large is really awesome. So.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the farm this year because even though it was like really crazy with COVID going on, they still had a system that was fun and safe. And it was, as Sage said, with a lot of different ages, and you could do almost everything that you could do at the farm, and it was all fun. And yeah,
I really think it was great that they made a lot of the chores and stuff still available to people, even though there was the issue with COVID. So thank you for listening.
Okay, you can hear me now, right? Technology is only as good as the user. This user could use a refresher course. Anyhow, partnering on with Audrey said, events at Native Community Organic Farm hold a special place. We consider them two of them to be gateway to the farm, Maple Magic and Spring Spectacular. We were in the fact that people come to these organized events, they get a taste of our seasonal, agricultural, educational fun, and they usually like what they see, and then they come back, and then they sign up for programs, and they buy our produce, and they go on to become people at my harvest dinner and donors to our annual appeal. So they're a very important part of the farm, and they build community and they retain community in ways that complement what we do with the educational programs. So we were able to hold a normal Maple Magic this year. We were, in hindsight, smart to move it forward to February 29th and squeak it in before the world sort of shut down. We served 600 people pancakes with the help of 40 volunteers and ran hundreds of people through our educational tours over the farm, where people can see how the Native Americans and the colonists sugared, in addition to seeing our sugar shack. And I'm glad that we were able to have that event and hold it fresh in our minds, because we're going to need that when we're going through maple sugaring season this year. The rest of the event here kind of got turned on its butt. And the wonderful thing about the farm is we figured out how to pivot and move on. So we started a 5K last year as a fundraiser for our scholarship forum. And we decided, why not we could run a virtual 5K this year. And it was really lovely to be able to announce that we were doing a 5K virtually on every runner calendar that just said canceled, 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 canceled after each race announcement. We had over 170 participants take part in the race. And we had an amazing outpouring of farm alumni, people in their 30s, their 40s, even their 50s, stepping up and saying that they were farm kids and running for us in Maryland and Colorado and Pennsylvania, and even 2 foreign countries, Germany and Jordan. So that was really exciting. And it was really affirming part of what we did. We had a wonderful t-shirt designed by the talented Luke family. We have a running chicken. She's our mascot. This year she was wearing a COVID mask on the t-shirt, and people wore those shirts with pride. So that was fun. And we will be doing the virtual race again this coming year for both bragging rights and your t-shirt. So stay tuned for a date announcement. So then the biggest question we had was how we were going to tackle our largest event of the year, our harvest dinner, which is both a lot of fun and a lot of good eating, and also our major fundraiser for our teen programming. And it was difficult because, you know, as we all know, the situation with COVID was very fluid, and 1 week it looked like we might be able to have some sort of gathering, and the next week not. So we were incredibly lucky in that a chef from our community, Peter Walker from Walnut Hill School for Fine Arts stepped forward and said, you know, Trish, if you want to make a meal to go, I can help you with that. And I knew better than to think twice about it. And I said, yes, it would. So we found ourselves producing a harvest dinner meal with a drive-through so that people could come and pick up their delicious farm-based meal of comfort foods that Peter and his very talented staff prepared for us. And then people took them home and ate them in small groups and really enjoyed themselves. And it was a really special thing to be part of, to see not only Peter and his staff rise to the occasion of making a really, truly wonderful meal that had omnivore options, vegetarian options, and a whole gluten-free option for folks who don't eat gluten, but also so that people could come together and eat outside around fire pits and around neighborhood patios and enjoy each other's company. And I think my favorite moment of all time will always be seeing 93-year-old Willard Honeywell come down from Pond Street in Wellesley. Willard hadn't left the house since March, but he and his caretaker ventured out at the end of dinner to come and pick up a meal. And it was just so nice to see him and have a wave and just, you know, a little sense of these are my people. And it was really, really super to see everybody. And I will also say that our teams and our volunteers stepped up spectacularly to help package food and run that drive-through. Once we got it moving, it went off like clockwork. So kudos to everyone for being willing to try something totally new and for trying our meal and for coming together and to have community spirit at a time when we were quite challenged to do so. So while I hope eventually to get back to the Wellesley College Club and holding our dinner in person, we do another meal to go, I have full confidence in the team that we can do it and do it well and rise to the challenge. So now we're going to hear a little video from Chef Peter Walker.
Hey, my name is Peter Walker. I'm the General Manager for Dining Services for Sodexo at the Walnut Hills School for the Arts, located in Natick, Massachusetts. Many thanks to the entire team at NCOF for asking me to be a part of last year's Harvest Dinner, or what I think we internally like to call Curbside Pickup Harvest Dinner. I know last year has been very challenging for all of us, and like most of you, we've had to pivot or adjust or swing our complete way of life. But in creating this menu, the team and I had to come up with some comfort foods, using, of course, the farm's produce and meats. And in order to pull this off, we needed to set up and use the Walnut Hills School for the Arts kitchen, where we prepared, cooked, plated, boxed, and transported all of the wonderful meals that we created to the farm. On behalf of myself, Samantha, and Oliver, who prepared, executed the night's dinner, thanks again. We hope it was an enjoyable meal for those who all purchased tickets. Thanks.
Thanks, Trish. The final stories of resilience from the farm will come from the production side. So we kind of turned a corner this year in terms of how we produce vegetables and flowers, as we kind of gave up our tillage equipment, and now we are a 100% no-till farm. So what that means is that we don't disturb the soil anymore, and it's kind of a new movement some farmers are trying out, and we're thankful that we're able to get on the bandwagon and see what it does. For me, it means, you know, one of the biggest things that no-till does is it sequesters carbon in the soil. And so if we think about climate change, we can create the soil as a living being, sucking that carbon down instead of pumping it up into the air every time we till. But it also makes my life a little bit simpler, because I know that the soil is a lot smarter than me. So if I can maintain that biology that's in there, they can help out with diseases and pests and things like that. And the kicker is that we've been working with some folks from the Real Food Campaign, who's a group associated with the Bionutrient Food Association, to figure out if we're producing more nutrient dense food. And so we've been part of a 2-year study, and they're getting all the data together right now, and we'll hopefully be able to showcase something in the near future about how how nutrient dense our food is. So that's a really exciting piece that we've put together this year. The next piece of resiliency in the production side, and if you want to flip to the next piece, if we think about the people aspect of producing food, it's tough sometimes to work outside in masks. And so I give our staff and all of our workers and everybody a ton of credit for wearing masks in super hot weather all summer long. They did an amazing job. And so we were very fortunate that people were adaptable and flexible, and whatever was going on that week related to COVID policies, we adapted and we changed, and the staff was super flexible and said, yeah, okay, I'll wear my mask. It's going to be super sticky and wet, but we're here. We're going to do this. And the staff was really, really amazing. And we also, I think about the community of people that visited us as well. In terms of safety protocols, we only had to shut down the farmhouse and the barn, but otherwise the community and the visitors who came to this farm throughout the season were very thoughtful and mindful about not touching gates, staying, socially distant. And it really made our jobs a little more secure. And so the community really stepped up as well. Every person who came on the weekdays or on the Saturdays and the Sundays that came to the farm, it was really amazing to see this community come together. One of the biggest things that we did this year in terms of resiliency was we offered and piloted a CSA program specifically for seniors in the community. So we have to thank Susan Ramsey and the folks over at Community Services for helping us with the logistics of getting that program going. But it was a really nice way to connect with the community, especially for folks who couldn't really leave their house. So the program was a small pilot that was started last year, and we packed everything all up, and then in conjunction with volunteers to the Community Services, we were able to deliver those to people's houses. And it was a really nice way to work with a population that really needed it. And so the story of resilience that I'm going to share with you related to the video is from one of my favorite people who comes to the farm, Ed. I always like talking to Ed because every time I see him, I feel like I'm sitting at Casey's Diner with him talking about local chatter. He's just a fun guy to know. And I've had the privilege of knowing him for about 2 years. He started as a volunteer. He comes on usually Thursdays, works with us out in the fields, does all the weeding and the cultivating. But then additionally, he does the food delivery to the seniors as well. And he's just been a great person to know and to have in our community. And he has such positive energy. And he's going to talk a little bit about that in the next video you'll see.
Hello, my name is Ed Helsh and I'm a volunteer at the farm. I've lived in Natick for the past 30 years, and I began volunteering after I retired from my work 3 years ago. I've been a project manager in the healthcare field for many years and decided that when I retire, I want to do something fulfilling and meaningful, and for me, that's been doing volunteer work. When I started looking into volunteer opportunities, a friend of mine suggested I contact the farm, knowing that I love animals and I'm an avid gardener. So I met with Chris Schell. Chris helped me to understand what volunteering involved at the farm, and she also helped me put together a schedule that's worked out real well for me. I'm typically at the farm 1 day a week. I get involved in lots of different things, from basic farm chores, watering, feeding, cleaning up after the animals, cleaning their stalls, repairing their stalls. I also have done planting of seeds, transplanting, weeding, harvesting vegetables, and putting together the CSA shares. I've delivered farm vegetables to retailers in the area and to the Natick Food Pantry. And during maple syrup season, I've tapped trees and helped collect maple sap from trees all over Natick. And in the process, learned how maple syrup's made. Now, apart from volunteering at the farm, I also deliver Meals on Wheels for the Natick Senior Center. My mom had received Meals on Wheels, so getting involved in that program was a way for me to give back. When I learned about the Farm Senior CSA Share Program from Karen Edwards at the Senior Center, I got involved and started delivering senior shares last summer. Due to the limitations the pandemic has put on food shopping, seniors often can't get fresh produce, so it felt really good to be able to bring the farm's high, fresh, organic produce to those seniors. And because of COVID, the conversations I had with these recipients were brief and at a distance, but it was nothing but good feedback that I got from them, and the people I spoke to all plan to sign up for the program if it's available again this summer. I found the farm to be a welcoming community, and I've benefited from my involvement with the farm, particularly this past year. Like everyone else, I felt the stress and isolation brought on by the pandemic, and the connections the farm provided with the staff and with the community we serve has been a blessing in these difficult times. As an added bonus, it's been a real joy for me to bring my 2 granddaughters to the farm. They love to go to the farm and visit with the various animals. I've learned a lot about farming from my friend Casey Townsend, who's been a real mentor. We usually work in teams, and Casey always takes the time to clearly explain what we're doing and why, whatever the task is, and the emphasis is always on teamwork. He's been really good to work with. So despite the pandemic, it was reassuring to me to see the farm continue to provide many of its programs and services to the community. I believe the Natick Community Organic Farm is a great asset to the town of Natick and the surrounding community, and I look forward to continuing volunteering at the farm. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Hope you're out there listening right now. Ed's awesome. If you guys ever get a chance to meet Ed, he's a great guy to know. So that was the 2020 review of what we did. And as we look forward, we're still thinking about meeting the need and what does the community need right now. And we're still tied up with COVID response, right? And so this picture really encapsulates what we're thinking about moving forward. This is a picture of Brooke, one of our TerraCore folks. We're doing some programming. But it has everything that we're thinking about as we turn the corner here. We're thinking about doing more educational programming. Audrey talked about our Farm Sprouts program, which is going to be starting up next week. Talking about producing more food. We can see this young gentleman here learning how to do seeds. Ed talked about our senior shares that we were able to provide last year. We're very fortunate this year to be working with the Natick Housing Authority to be providing 25 CSA shares for those folks as well. And that's another way that we feel we can give back to Natick, to people who really are food insecure. And then lastly, just staying open. We have no plans to shut the doors. We will stay open as long as the farm is around. We feel very blessed that the community has supported us, and we need to support the community as we move forward. So with that said, we have talked a lot. So I wanted to pass it over to Farmer Trish, who will be introducing Jillian.
It's office farmer Trish, okay? Just keep it straight, Casey. It's my great pleasure to introduce you all to Jillian Wilson Martin. I know a lot of you know her, but I think it bears repeating. She's a very accomplished person. So not only is Jillian a Natick resident, she is the Town of Natick Sustainability Coordinator. In her professional role, she works to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions and prepare us for the impacts of climate change. She's worked for the town since 2014, and she's led some very major projects for us, including Natick's development of a net zero action plan, installation of more than 1 megawatt of public solar and battery storage around town, the implementation of our curbside composting programming, and a whole lot more. We're excited that she's partnering with us on a new project, which I know she'll talk about in her presentation, that's going to bring our healthy local produce to Natick's most food insecure neighbors in 2021 and beyond. So it's with great pleasure that we introduce Jillian, farm member, and mom of farm kids to all of you. Take it away, Jillian.
Hi, thank you everyone. It's really an honor to be here. And I was so inspired listening to your stories of resilience. Some of them I kind of felt, my heart beat a little bit faster. It's such a great place that you have. And I'm so grateful that we have the farm here in Natick. And when I was working on my slides, I got a little bit of a sneak preview of the slides that were presented before me, and it got me thinking about the topic of resilience and what does resilience really mean. And it's kind of funny, I was looking into resilience, and one thing I didn't really realize but makes sense to me is that resilience is actually a measure, like a unit that's used in engineering, and it's really about solid materials and their ability to undergo external stress without breaking or losing elasticity or functionality. And I can see how like so many of us have been through that, right? We've gone through such an incredibly hard year. We've really been stressed to our limits, but we haven't broken. And I can see that the farm has really lifted people up and like helped them hone those resiliency skills. And it's so exciting that you guys do that. And the next is kind of like a little bit of a tangent, but it just reminds me of all the people we have in Natick that are thinking about resilience and even in different ways, which is the next slide of, am I supposed to be advancing the slides? Yeah, there you go. Which is in Natick, we have our army base here, and our soldiers there are working on resilience every day. It's something that they think about a lot in terms of their ability to be resilient in difficult places, but they have a new building that they're working on that is all about doing those kinds of tests that we're talking about, where they're measuring the resiliency of materials that they're putting on soldiers. Like a friend of mine works there, and they're working on gloves and how they put their gloves into these machines that test them at these crazy temperatures and all these really intense extremes for all the different types of equipment that they're putting soldiers in. And it just goes to show you how thoughtful and like detailed and progress and measurement oriented you can be when it comes to resilience. And so if you go to the next couple of slides, the thing that I think about when I think about our resilience is how can we be resilient in the face of climate change? And I apologize because I was just thinking about these pictures and they remind me a lot of the COVID charts that I see. And it's a little bit disturbing. And it's something that I felt a lot in the beginning of the year, or in the beginning of March and April, when we started talking about these like exponential growth of COVID. And I thought, man, I know about exponential growth because I think about it with climate change a lot. And what we have here these are charts that are available from the state, from the Commonwealth's website. They have a data tool called Resilient MA, and it shows us what projections for our region, our state, our county you can look at. These are charts that are for the Charles River watershed area. And they show that by 2050 in Massachusetts, we're expecting the growing season to be much longer. That's what you see on the left-hand side. So rising temperatures will correlate with a longer growing season. That's measured in something called growing degree days, and that's expected to increase by 23 to 52% just by 2050. So just in the next 30 years. So by the time that my children are maybe making me a grandmother, the change will have happened. At the same time, we're looking at how the maximum temperature is changing. So right now in Massachusetts, we have about 5 days every year that are above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And by 2050, the expectation is that could increase by 10 to 63 days. So we're really seeing some big changes happening in our natural world, and how will we be resilient to those? Next slide. The other big things that we have to worry about in our area of Massachusetts, because we are inland and sea level rise will not be impacting Natick directly as much, at least in terms of our natural environment, though there will be changes in who's living in Natick as the sea level rises elsewhere, but precipitation is changing. And annual precipitation is expected to increase by 2 to 13% by 2050. And winter precipitation that happens in the winter is actually supposed to be up by 21% by 2050. And then on the right, you can see annual days with precipitation of greater than an inch. And that's supposed to be increasing by between 0 and 3 days a year, or between 0 and 3 days by 2050. We'll have that many more days where we're having kind of heavy rain events. So on the next slide is the definition that the state has for resiliency. And this is something that I actually feel like really speaks to the work that I do here in Natick, which is about helping our community be more resilient. And the state defines resilience as the ability of a system and its component parts to anticipate, absorb, accommodate, or recover from the effects of a hazardous event in a timely and efficient manner. And next slide, for me, that's really about climate resilience. And my work here in Natick is structured around two kind of core pillars. It's about climate change mitigation, which is, since we know that we are contributing to climate change and it's creating a bad situation for us in the future, what can we do to reduce our contribution to that? How can we prevent the worst case scenario from happening? And in that work, I do a lot of installations of renewable energy and a lot of other projects that I'm going to talk to you about. And then adaptation. So we know that the climate is changing. That means that maybe we can't plant the same crops that we did before. That means that maybe we need to think about different kinds of infrastructure. On this picture here, you see a time when the Charles River was flooded recently. That happens a lot on the Charles River. And we have a dam on the Charles River right now that we have to make a decision as a community. Do we want to repair that dam or do we want to breach that dam? And what is the right thing for us to do as we think about those decisions in the context of our changing climate? Next slide. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about mitigation, and you can go to the next slide. Mitigation is something that's really been working on for a while. So mitigation is really all about reducing our emissions, like I mentioned, and that can be on projects like energy efficiency projects for the town. It can be projects like electrification or electric vehicle charging stations. And Natick's history in this really started before I began working with the town. We have a lot of investment in this space. So we had an environmental compliance officer in Natick before I started, and he began working in the town, I think in like the early 2000s. In 2004, he had helped Natick join the ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability Council. He was able to establish Natick as a green community, which is a designation the state provides if you meet certain requirements. And he was able to help Natick install solar in some of our first public buildings. And since he's retired, I've been able to increase that amount of solar. We were able to achieve a 20% reduction in our energy use from our school and municipal operations, including the energy that we use to power our vehicles, to collect recycling, to power the pumps that bring water to your homes or moves wastewater away from your homes to the sewer. We've also added electric cars to our municipal fleet. We've become designated as a gold community for national solar designation. We've installed almost 900 solar installations on residential properties. And most recently, in 2018, in the fall of that year, town meeting, which is the local legislative body in Natick, they voted to adopt a non-binding resolution to set a goal for Natick to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And what that means is, if you can go to the next slide. Right now in Natick, we are emitting a lot more from things that we do every day, from powering our homes, heating our homes, cooking, driving our vehicles, having our businesses run and operate, things that we need to do, but we're doing them in an unsustainable way. And those emissions are outweighing the ability of our community to produce renewable energy and the amount of carbon sequestration that we provide in natural services through our trees and our wetlands and through the work that you're doing there on the farm. And so net zero, next slide, is all about getting that to be in balance. So really being more resilient in that we're able to produce what we need and not exceed it. and really create that kind of more sustainable approach that would allow us to continue and be recognizing what's happening with the climate. So one of the first things that we did in working on net zero as part of the non-binding resolution that town meeting supported, and they supported it by a very strong majority, which was exciting. Part of that resolution asked the town to measure the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. So what emissions are originating in Natick and where are they coming from? And what can we do about them? And on the what can we do about them part, they asked us to create a plan. And our plan is right now in the process of being finalized. We're going to be speaking with different boards and committees that are elected or appointed in the coming month or so, with a goal of presenting to town meeting in the spring. But we're going to give you a little bit of a sneak preview of that, and you can find a lot of this information on the sustainability webpage too. So in doing the greenhouse gas inventory on the next slide, on this slide, you can see that we found a lot of really interesting facts. So we did an inventory for the year 2017, because that's the year where we had the most available data to do what we thought would be a very accurate inventory. And what we found is that despite the presence of business in Natick, and we do have a lot of business in Natick versus some of our peer communities, 62% of the emissions that originate in Natick come from residents. And a lot of those emissions come from our homes and from our vehicles. And you can see that based on the pie chart here, which shows which fuels are generating the most emissions. So the largest single source of emissions is gasoline, which is clearly tied to our vehicles. Natural gas is second, which is how we're heating most of our homes. Oil is also how we're heating our homes, and then electricity, how we're powering our devices and a lot of other things that we use to get through the day. And as part of the inventory, can you guys hear me? Yeah. The inventory provided us with the data and the tools that we needed to start asking questions about what was next and how could we pursue net zero by 2050. So the first question that we asked was, where does Natick's electricity come from? And you can see that on the next slide, which right now we have about 45% of our electricity coming from polluting sources and 55% coming from clean sources. And when I say clean sources, right now I'm including nuclear sources in that, and I'm including older scale renewable energy projects in that. And that can sometimes be controversial in the sustainability space about what to include. But when we're talking about carbon-free sources of electricity, that's the state's guidance on what to include. And the reason that that amount was so high is actually because through our electricity aggregation program here in Natick, which is a program where the town, through the Board of Selectmen, decides who your supplier for electricity is going to be, like where your power is coming from. And you can choose to opt out of what the town's doing and choose your own. But if you don't do anything, the town picks it for you. And we're choosing to pick a supplier that includes 13% more clean electricity than you would get otherwise if the town wasn't intervening. And we've actually been increasing that over the years. And the Sustainability Committee has presented to the Select Board a draft policy asking them to increase the amount of renewable energy in our electricity by a small amount every year to 2030, so we can get to 100% clean sources through a combination of what Natick can do on its own, and then also changes that are happening at the state level. So that's one exciting way that we're pursuing net zero. The next way that we're pursuing net zero is around our homes. And something we discovered through our inventory that was really fascinating to us was how many homes in Natick are still relying on oil heat. So almost 30% of homes in Natick don't have access to natural gas, or they're still relying on oil. And those homes are really great candidates for electrification and switching to heat pump technology to power their homes and heat their homes. And ultimately, net zero means that all of our homes are going to be using heat pumps or a different form of heat than natural gas or combustion. And that's kind of a wild idea right now, because it's so many of us are relying on these furnaces and heating systems that do rely on combustion. But the future is that our homes will be fully electric. And right now, Massachusetts is considering a net zero stretch code. And what that means is the code and the standards that new construction is built and major renovations would start to require those new buildings to be fully electric and to be net zero to start, or maybe net zero capable, so they could at a low cost be retrofitted in the future. And Natick is advocating for that stretch code to be improved to meet that goal, to avoid locking in these future emissions. And on the next slide is about our vehicles. And when we took a little bit closer look at the vehicle emissions in Natick, we found that the majority of them were coming from residential cars. And most households in Natick own at least 2 cars. There are something like, I'm going to get it wrong, but something like 28,000 cars registered in Natick. And we have 36,000 people. And some of them are kids that can't drive, right? So we have a lot more cars than maybe we need. Or maybe it's not, maybe we do have the right amount of cars that we need, but we are needing to make a change in this space. And I find the transportation space to be especially complex, because it depends not only on the vehicle you drive, but it could depend on how you get somewhere. And is there a place you can even go that you want to go or need to go that is accessible in a way that's not a car? And we have some real limitations being in a suburb when it comes to that. So one of the big strategies is the electrification of our vehicles. And interestingly, the Baker administration is proposing that Massachusetts by 2035 stop the sale of gasoline powered vehicles, which is something California is doing. And so that is really a game changer for this market, and we'll see how it goes. But in Natick, we're working on ways that we as a municipality can support electrification. And we have charging stations around town right now. And we're working on ways where we can pilot ride sharing and bike sharing and other different kinds of ways of changing how we get around town. So those are kind of our big strategies as it relates to mitigation. And there's more that you'll see in the net zero plan, but those are some of the things we're really excited about. But the other piece of resiliency is the adaptation side. And so this is a heat map, or a map of land surface temperatures in our region. And this is from 2019. You can click on the link later if you're interested, but you can see Natick is a little bit of a hot area because we do have so many heat islands in Natick from the Route 9 and massively, paved and impervious surface that we have in this town. So when it comes to adaptation, the place that we start is really our MVP planning process. I think that might be Casey right there, actually. So Casey participated in our MVP program. And MVP stands for Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. And it's a program that is provided or is supported by the state. And it really encourages communities and provides a very clear path to assessing your vulnerabilities and your hazards in your community, and thinking about the impacts of climate change as it relates to the economics, the social structure of the community, and also your infrastructure. And in the next slide, when we went through our MVP planning process, we identified more than 40 priority actions for the town, and they're all kind of listed, the categories are listed there. We wanted to learn how we could develop our town in a more low impactful manner. So how can we incorporate green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in our development? And how can we integrate that thinking, especially into the public projects that we work on? How can we improve emergency response, knowing that we have these greater storm events and higher days of precipitation, likely more flooding coming to our community? What can we do to be more prepared for that? With more storm events in Massachusetts and more severe storms, how can we protect our power supply? We're working on trying to make our power supply more resilient in Natick. Water management, how can we better manage stormwater as it goes into our lakes and rivers? And especially how can we incorporate and engage in vulnerable populations in the decisions that we make, and also providing support for them? And how can we use our open space and not only conserve more open space, but really make sure that we are getting the best use out of that open space in terms of management and the function of the open space. And every year we update our MVP plan and provide a progress report to the state. And we've been able to get some funds to do some cool projects that I'm going to tell you about a couple of them. So one of the first projects, and this doesn't sound particularly like exciting, but it actually is really meaningful, and I thought it was kind of cool. We worked really hard on reviewing our stormwater bylaw. Getting muted. And so with our stormwater bylaw, previously our stormwater bylaw, which basically provides rules for properties in terms of where they send runoff from their home, it was only applicable to properties that were 40,000 square feet or more. I think I might get this wrong. It was basically properties that were almost the size of a football field. And there weren't really that many properties in Natick that actually even met that criteria. So it was something like less than 10% of properties of parcels in Natick were even that big. And you had to be disturbing, essentially like ripping up a football size worth of land to have the bylaw even impact you. So the Conservation Commission was only seeing projects that met this criteria for really big projects like MathWorks or something like that on Route 9. And what we did is we worked on setting new thresholds for the stormwater bylaw. So now we have two different types of regulations, and one's like for a minor permit, one's for a major permit. And what you see here are all the different, almost like artificial watersheds in Natick that show you, if you live, for example, in that little like yellow section in the center of the map, which is where I live, the water that hits my driveway drains off my driveway into the street, into the storm drain, and it actually goes into Doug Pond. And almost all of the water that drains in Natick Center goes into Doug Pond. And we have a lot of problems with the water quality in Doug Pond. And actually in every water body we have in Natick, all of the water bodies in Natick are impaired to some degree. And so by managing the stormwater better, we're able to hopefully improve the water quality is the goal. And an MVP grant helped us do that. The next project we worked on with MVP was a tree planting plan. And this has been really exciting because what we did was kind of similar to that map. We used data from previously acquired data around land surface temperatures in Natick, and we mapped the whole town and what the land surface temperatures were. And we worked with an arborist to assess areas where there were heat islands to see where were there good opportunities for planting trees to help mitigate those heat islands. So those little tiny green dots are actually all these places where a tree would make sense. And it's actually been looked at by an arborist to say like, yes, this is a good place for a tree because there's no overhead power lines. There's no obstruction here. It's not near a house. We've contacted all the residents who have parcels that match where those dots are. And we've had a lot of residents express interest, and the town's tree warden is providing free street trees to those residents. And the town maintains those trees for 3 years as they kind of take root. Another cool project that we did recently was with, this is actually with NASA, and I apologize because I didn't credit NASA on here, which is probably, I'm gonna get arrested tomorrow for that. So NASA using satellite data, it was like so cool because NASA emailed me over the summer and I was like, this is spam. I'm not even gonna like reply to these people, but it was actually NASA. And they worked with us to assess the flood vulnerability of Natick. And this is kind of showing more of census-based data, but they actually use satellite data to see what parts of the Charles River watershed and all of Natick, because Natick is actually half the Charles River watershed and half the Suasco. And they looked at Natick and the entire watershed, and they assessed where flooding happens and where are there vulnerabilities, like where are there populations that are more susceptible to flooding, like elderly populations, people living in poverty. And what's really cool, and there's actually a webinar about it tomorrow, we're working through a new grant with the MVP program with the Charles River watershed and with, I think, 15 other communities in the watershed, including a bunch of our watershed neighbors like Wellesley and Sherborne and Holliston. We're working with them to map and to model and map the impacts of the projected increases in precipitation. So right now we have these old maps that help us decide where development can happen and where people should plan to build their homes, and they're FEMA maps, and they're all based on flood events that have happened in the past and how frequent those flood events are. But guess what? You saw that those charts about precipitation and other impacts of climate change, and the future is different from the past. And so we're looking to plan development in Natick based on future projections. And we're going to be doing that work with those other communities. And then, sorry, I'm talking so fast, I'm getting excited here. The last project is a grant that we are getting with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council with the farm, with the Natick Community Organic Farm. And I'm so excited about this project. It was highly inspired by Jay and Ricky Ball. I think I saw them earlier. They're really wonderful advocates for affordable housing in Natick. And Ricky Ball has for years now been kind of bugging me about this idea that she had that was a great idea, but I never had funding, which is to build community gardens where we have public housing, and to build those gardens to help serve residents of the housing authority and provide them with a source of food and inspiration, and I think connections to the earth that maybe they don't have every day. And what's also really inspirational is that this summer, a Natick High School student, Fiona Rip, she actually started doing this on her own through a Girl Scout project, and she was able, with partnerships from the community and the housing authority, to rebuild and restore a couple of beds that were in disrepair at the farm, or at the housing authority. And you can see a picture of those here. And on the next slide as well, you can see Fiona kind of guiding her team of youth and engaged parents and friends in filling those initial beds that she was able to restore. And through this grant, what we're excited about, it would be a partnership with the farm, with the housing authority, the Council on Aging, and the Senior Center, the Natick Service Council, and also Keefe Tech. And on the next slide, it really has kind of 3 prongs. And I kind of think it was the first 2 as these kind of programs that we're delivering and the services, and then the bottom being kind of the foundation of all of it. But we're going to be able to develop about 60 community garden plots at the housing authority. And right now the plan is for that to be built behind the red house on Cottage Street. I think of it as almost like the main house of the housing authority, but kind of behind the Coolidge Gardens neighborhood in that back area. And that will serve not only residents of the housing authority who are interested in it, but also residents of Natick Center. And also it'll have spots that are allocated for the Natick Service Council for volunteers to help manage. And those beds will be built in partnership with the farm through the farm youth work program in the summer that we're really excited about working with. And the farm will, through the grant, will be able to provide starter seedlings for the low-income residents who participate in that garden. The grant will also provide funding for the farm to increase and continue the subsidized CSA shares for seniors, and also to provide full CSA shares of a certain amount to the Natick Service Council that can be provided to their clients. And then it's also going to actually help us with something that I'm really excited about, which is trying to build these relationships between vulnerable populations and and the community, and to help prepare vulnerable populations to get ready for climate change. And through that work, we're really focused on social resilience. And so not only are we going to be building these, garden beds, we're also going to be trying to build them in a way where we're creating spaces for safe places to gather, support for a community garden coordinator, a part-time position that would actually work on, pushing this kind of ethos and idea to all of our community gardens. So we would have special plots allocated that are subsidized for vulnerable populations throughout Natick, because we have a network of community gardens, and also providing programming that makes sense for those residents. So not your, the typical garden club type of programming, but programming that is really meeting those residents where they're at and helping them in things that they're interested in as it relates to gardening. So the timeline for that project is that this year in 2021, we'll be working with the farm to build those beds, and with the goal of opening the garden for use and growing in spring 2022. And we'll have the CSA shares available. Those will be funded this year and next year. And we hope to hire a community garden coordinator, part-time position to help with that programming starting when the gardens open. So for spring 2022. And I think that's all I have. That's really it. So I really appreciate you inviting me to come, and I welcome your questions, and my email is there if you'd like to email me after. So thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. That was great. It's really exciting to see all of this sort of meshing together to make us a stronger community of people and of climate. So I'm looking forward to our part in it. Do people have questions for Jillian? I can see a few people maybe nodding yes. This is the part in the presentation where it'd be okay to unmute and identify yourself and ask a question if you got one. Okay, well, if you're like me, you'll probably stay up thinking about this all night and then have a dozen questions for it tomorrow. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is that if you do think of questions, that you reach out to Jill.
I do have one question, if I may.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So, Jillian, just out of curiosity, given the initiative to be net carbon neutral by 2050, how's it been for the last couple of years? What's been the behind the scenes feedback from companies or from community members? Have you gotten positive or negative feedback on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we tried hard to engage the public on it, and we, in light of COVID, some of the outreach that we wanted to do, we weren't able to, but we found different ways. We ran an online open house this fall that was really well attended. We had almost 400 people participate.
Great.
And we've actually gotten really incredibly positive feedback. So, maybe it's just because people are reaching out to me with positive feedback, but I do get my share of negative feedback in town. But no, people have been really excited. I think there's kind of a new energy around climate too. I think that's clear even with the Baker administration right now. It was disappointing last week. Or maybe it was the week before. I don't know how much of you follow like the state house and local legislation, but he did pocket veto a climate bill that people were really hoping he would sign. And that was, I think people were disappointed by that. But at the same time, his administration in December and January released these two really kind of bold plans for Massachusetts around climate. So I think that with the federal government and the state government really interested in this, we're going to see a lot of funding and support. And I really am excited about 2021. I think it's going to be kind of a landmark year for climate change.
That's great. Thanks.
I have a question that's based in the personal and the community. So I'm so excited by the rail trail opening in the spring. I just bought an electric bike. And so I should be using my regular bike and getting exercise as well. What I find though, is instead of getting in a 18 miles per gallon minivan, I'm getting on my electric bike. So with the rail trail, you know, one of the things about an electric bike is expensive. Like, will there be lots of bike lockup points along the rail trail? How do we kind of encourage that? If I go to the mall, that is a really great place at Central to encourage me to use my bike, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in the net zero planning work, we've been talking a lot with the Transportation Advisory Committee, which is a group of citizens who are kind of leading that effort in Natick, and they're involved in the rail trail efforts. You know, I know that Josh Ostroff, who has been kind of the man who is like, his energy has been dedicated to the rail trail for the past 5 years or so, or not longer. I know that he has a vision for having a bike share on the rail trail. And I think there's an interest in electric scooters and electric bikes, which are actually available in other communities, not even communities as suburban as Natick. Communities like Westboro and Marlboro, I think, have bike share programs. So it's definitely something that is actually in our net zero plan. When and where and how exactly it will happen is a little TBD, but it's something that we're really interested in. And on your electric bike thing, we're working on a regional electrification program that would work with other towns and would provide residents with access to recommended installers and vendors for electrification. And we're really excited about electric bikes because that's such a, in many ways, it's a lower price point to enter this kind of climate initiative. Is cheaper than getting solar panels on your house, for example, or changing your heater. So we're hoping to make that more available to residents through like bulk purchasing and things like that. So maybe we'll have to feature you as a demo for the program.
Awesome. Thank you. Sign me up.
Great.
Are there any other questions from folks for Jillian?
Well, you'll have to invite me back next time when there's food. I didn't get the invite on the food here.
My God, these people can cook. You have really, yeah, just put it on the calendar for next year. It's not to be missed.
Thank you, Jillian, so much. It was awesome to have you on, and everybody else who was on board for this year's, hopefully first and last Zoom meeting for our annual meeting. Thank you so much. I want to take a special moment just to thank Anne, who has been our gracious driver. Anne, you want to show yourself there amongst the pictures. Anne has been doing all the behind the scenes work, putting a lot of the pieces of the presentation together. She's been awesome. So thanks, Anne, so much for all the work that you've done on this piece. We're very grateful for that fact. But thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming out to support us, and come on down to the farm. So some of you I know are asking a little bit about sugaring this year. So we are doing some sugaring tours. So contact Christine with sugaring questions. So we will find a way to have people still enjoy the sugaring season. And with that said, I'd like to speak for Audrey, Trish, and the rest of the staff and the board and say thanks for everybody coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. And we will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Talking.
Really well done.
Yeah, great job. Thank you.